Yo guys, I'm Dunmere. I'm a rank 1 peak Supervive player, and I have almost 1,000 hours in the game, around 400 of which were played on Kingpin. So with that, I went ahead and put together a Kingpin guide for you guys, so that you can hopefully get something useful out of it and have more fun playing Kingpin in your games. So yeah. Now for Kingpin's strengths and weaknesses. Kingpin's first major strength is that he has a very powerful neutral threat capability. Since Kingpin's hook can travel through walls, he has a constant circle of threat around him. While there are an assortment of characters with wall traversing abilities, Kingpin holds the most threat as it can pull enemies into unescapable danger when used correctly. So if there is any cover or walls between Kingpin and the enemy, they must be very careful when he still has his hook available. Kingpin's second major strength is that he also has great solo target damage. With his slam offering a reliable method to access his 50% bonus backstab damage, Kingpin can easily nuke down enemies that he catches out. On top of this, his ultimate offers another source of very powerful solo target threat, while his 2 dashes offer a rapid way to reach enemies and apply this kill potential. In addition to these, Kingpin is also one of the stronger abyss fighting characters on the roster. His slam will insta-kill any enemy he hits with it over the abyss, so it gives him a very powerful capability to ledge guard when facing enemies trying to chase into him. He also has 2 dashes he can delay gliding with, and a quick firing primary fire he can use to catch and spike enemies using their glider, while also having the ability to hover in the air if he lands a hook while over the abyss. Now with the strengths covered, let's move on to the weaknesses. Kingpin's first weakness is his frequent low strength windows. While he is quite powerful when correctly landing a cooldown combo, he doesn't have much to offer when those abilities are missed or unavailable. This is because his primary fire suffers from being both low range and inconsistent in damage output, and he doesn't have abilities that guarantee value. And on top of this, he is one of the more mana intensive characters in the roster, so when one of these negative conditions apply, as they frequently do during fights, Kingpin becomes very weak. On top of this, Kingpin suffers from his second weakness of having a very large hitbox, while only having a slightly larger amount of HP than other characters to compensate. His hitbox is double the average character's size, which simply makes him catch more damage than other characters. Yet this also gains him an even extra weakness with how common crowd control abilities are in this game, as they equally affect Kingpin. With the lethality being as high as it is in Supervive, Kingpin wasn't given enough HP to help him withstand the significantly higher chance he has of being caught by CC that wouldn't have hit another character. This means that Kingpin requires much better positioning skill to survive overall. This all combines for Kingpin's most fundamental weakness, which is that he doesn't gain a lot of easy value, as most of it is quite skill intensive and risky. Unlike many other characters in the game, the majority of Kingpin's value is both dependent on good mechanics and a good ability to read the flow of a fight. While hitting his hook isn't the hardest thing in the game, all of Kingpin's other value is close range, meaning he must physically commit his body to gain it and therefore risk his life. And as mentioned before, his double-sized hitbox makes it much easier for him to be punished. Make a poor engagement or make a mechanical mistake with a dash slam, and Kingpin may just lose his life for it. Compare this to other characters where many of them could lob stuns from range, or just chunk in damage with very little risk to themselves, while also being able to completely save their dashes for self-defense. With the strengths and weaknesses covered, let's talk about how you actually play Kingpin. Kingpin plays best with a guerrilla sort of style. He should always be looking to sneak around in the shadows, looking for a hook or good slam engagement. Then, whether he lands his aggressive attempt or not, he should immediately retreat out of enemy vision and look for a new flank opportunity. By continuing to hunt for better and better opportunities as the fight goes on, he'll weaken his enemies so much until you can just push them and mop them up. With that as an overview, let's get on to specifics about his ability usage. Unlike some other characters on the roster, Kingpin's value is combo based, rather than consistently coming from his primary fire or another source. In this, he has 3 primary ways he can kill enemies. First, he can hook enemies into a slam that he can either finish with a primary fire or his ultimate. However, this combo isn't guaranteed like in some other games, so it's best to try and trap the enemy up against a wall so their escape direction is more predictable. Also, this combo is best finished by circling around and aiming for the backstab bonus. Second, he can do a shortened version of this combo that doesn't include the hook. This is best accomplished with a dash to catch enemies out, or you can also use the short dash with the long dash to cover even more distance, or to adjust to the enemy's movement, but this is more risky as you'll lack an escape after. Third is simply a dash engage with Kingpin's ultimate. As mentioned before, the damage sweet spot is very fine, so this means a non-stunned enemy will nearly always avoid most of it unless Kingpin dashes right before the damage goes off. This method of engaging with ult is not Kingpin's most reliable though, and should only really be used if enemies are very grouped up or caught in an ally stun. Kingpin players should usually default to using these combos in the order mentioned, first going for the hook slam combo, then looking for a dash slam combo if it missed. And then the raw ultimate dash combo can maybe be considered, but it is usually best to just wait to recover cooldowns. There's also an alternate set of hook use cases that Kingpin can sometimes go for, which is to hook an ally to safety, save a teammate wisp from being stomped on by an enemy, or pull an enemy wisp to deny the resurrect. These won't open up as common options, but are still important to remember in case they do. Yet most of all, a Kingpin player should never overestimate their character and just toss themselves into the enemy to try and outbrawl them, as Kingpin simply will not provide the kind of value he would need to. Though Kingpin may seem like a big brawler that enemies should be afraid of, he really isn't when not having these combos up. His primary fire is single target, inconsistent, and relatively low damage output compared to other characters, while also requiring him to use the slower fire rate on anything not directly on top of him. His hitbox is also twice the size of the average characters, while his max HP is only 20% or so more than theirs. This means Kingpin just doesn't want to be a part of any fight where he isn't either completely safe or completely trashing an enemy with one of his combos. So with the specifics covered, how should this all be applied into an overall playstyle for Kingpin? As mentioned before, Kingpin being both combo based and more specialized than other characters means he is only very powerful when the situation is just right for him. Yet since Kingpin can only really gain value in these situations, this means that Kingpin is quite predictable. He just doesn't have the consistent value or range of other characters. So if you can see Kingpin, you know exactly what he's going to try and do, and therefore how to easily counter it. So how do you counter your own predictability as a Kingpin player? You abuse the vision system and the power of flanking. Since the game's vision system allows players to see an enemy if an ally can see them, Kingpin can obscure himself from enemy sightlines to completely hide himself while still gaining perfect vision of an enemy's location. This gains even more benefit when combined with the partial flanks that provide Kingpin an assortment of benefits. First, the flank increases his chances of him not being seen by enemies, as they are more likely to be looking at the core of his team. This means he can use this to get close to enemies for a dash slam, or force a reaction check with a hook coming from an unpredictable location. Similarly, the second benefit is that Kingpin won't have to be physically in location that most damage and abilities will be traveling toward. Kingpin's large hitbox makes him quite vulnerable after landing a hook on enemies, so playing in the middle of his team risks him being chunked easily by damage or stuns that weren't even necessarily meant for him. Third, a flank allows Kingpin to continue to support his teammates when he normally wouldn't be able to. As mentioned before, Kingpin lacks the potential to really threaten the enemy at all after going for a combo. He either lacks the dashes necessary to engage again, the hook to catch someone, or the slam to follow up on whatever he wants to do. But continuing to be on a flank forces the enemy to keep thinking about him, meaning they must use abilities or mental resources to prepare for him. If a Kingpin doesn't do this, the enemy can then just focus his team 4v3 with no concern for what he'll do. While even if the enemy ignores him, an unseen Kingpin can gain shocking value from a surprise primary fire or ultimate backstab. As mentioned, Kingpin plays best with a guerrilla sort of style, so constantly focus on your sneaking to maximize your chances of landing a combo. Essentially, you just don't want to engage if you can be seen. Then, if you don't get a combo off that you went for or can't consider a strong enough advantage, you should always reflank and look for another opportunity as the fight goes on. Keep on doing this and your enemies will never know what to expect.